Okay, welcome everyone. This meeting will be recorded and on live stream on YouTube. I want to make you aware about that. Okay, welcome. Before we start, I want to tell a bit about our think tank group, Agile Construction TR and Happy Construction events. First of all, you are here. We are so happy because of that, because we are starting a new event series here. The Agile Construction TR platform has been founded in 2017 and has developed the first Agile management experiences in Turkey with a main contractor, a facade works contractor, and design company to show the benefits of Agile approaches and Scrum to different phases and types of companies. Since then, we have been writing blogs, organizing meetups, and etc. We are seeking for happiness for all shareholders of the construction industry, from idea phase to operation and demolition, because all affects the other. Happy construction events are our recent meetup events organized once a month, probably on the last Wednesday evening at 20 of Istanbul zone. Our colleagues will share their experiences and practices of agility. You can follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram for next events and activities. And also you can join our team and community for different activities. Now it's time to start our second Happy Construction event. You can share your questions at the chat board to be responded at the end. Today we are welcoming Edward Murphy. He's an building engineer and tell about the benefits of agile approaches in design phase, prevent disorders and reworks during construction and occupation phases. Welcome, Eddie.
Thank you, Demet. Lovely to be here. What a great title, Happy Construction Events. It's really nice to be able to spread some happiness tonight, and I hope that my presentation will serve to do that.
Whenever I talk to you, you are so smiley, and your energy passes to us. And
well, we've got to try and have some fun, haven't we? Whilst we're doing this very difficult project work that we normally do from day to day. So would you like me to share screen and make a start?
Please try. It will be okay.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just see. So I'm going to share my full screen, so you'll get a full view of my PC for a moment. And I should have probably had it on the right screen to begin with. So, okay, I'll just get rid of everybody here. So I can't see anybody now, but welcome everybody who's kind of come. We're kind of small in number here on the live event tonight, but I'm sure we'll kind of we'll have a cozy chat here, shall we say. Demet asked me to talk to you about agility in the design process. I suppose I'll start off first by introducing myself, so a little bit about me. I'm Eddie Murphy. I'm not that famous actor from America. I'm actually the founder of my own company, which I founded 6 years ago now, called OLLIO. OLLIO is actually 0 to 10 if you look at it closely in English. And my sort of belief being that the first 10% of time in any design process is the most important 10%, because if we leave that 10% of time not having the basics of the project sorted out, then usually well, let's say it gets difficult, or more difficult if you haven't got it sorted out. I'm a chartered building services engineer by discipline. They're the people who design the pipes and wires and ducts and air conditioning. I'm sure a lot of you will kind of know that already. My career started here in Sheffield, right in the middle of the UK, for a little company called Husband and Company. They're a little company, but they did some really great projects. I moved on from there to White Young Green. I spent a little bit of time at Ove Arab. I'm sure a lot of you know the international firm that is Ove Arab. And then from Ove Arab, I moved on to another global company, Mott MacDonald, who do lots of work pretty much all over the globe, including where you guys are in Turkey. I say I left there 6 years ago, formed OLLIO, and since then I've become what's known as a WELL AP, so designing buildings that are good for health and well-being. And also just last year, I became a Scrum Master, so somebody who actually understands how to run Agile projects. I've been a designer, so that's where I kind of started literally on the design boards, and made my way up to become a director. But in the process, I became involved in the design of some large and small projects. Twickenham Stadium, for those of you who are rugby fans, will recognise that. And there are a number of other sort of large types of projects there that you'll some of you who are in the UK will recognise them. All of my design work has been underpinned to some extent or another by deep-seated research, mainly research involved in post-occupancy evaluation, so going back to buildings. And a lot of my research is founded around that whole centre about how do we actually get buildings that are better for users. So I've been involved in the urban flows, evolutionary algorithms to feed it forward, Agile, and one of the projects I'm going to tell you about tonight is this last one down here, is Innovate UK's Agile in Buildings. And so that's a piece of research, and there's 3 case studies that came out of that, but I'm going to concentrate on one just to show you how we deployed Agile through the whole design process for a building to see whether it would actually work in practice. So, so the whole topic is around finding the happiness factor. So, like I say, I love the name of this series of webinars, and I think you could actually interchange the word Agile for happiness, because I do think bringing Agile into your projects does actually bring happiness into projects. So I'm interested in not just designing buildings for building's sake as dumb assets, but as dynamic tools and amenities that actually help a business be better at what they do. So essentially giving them a set of tools, giving them a building that is a set of tools to make the whole process of just living and working in that building more pleasurable, improve the effectiveness of the activities that happen there. And then on top of all of that, hopefully, because people understand the building a bit better, they'll reduce its running cost, protect the planet, if we let them. And all of that then hopefully would actually help them to feel good that they're getting things done and the building is doing for them what they need it to do for them. So I suppose that we're going to start off with the white sheet of paper and decide that we want to design a building like that. We kind of usually go to the architect as the first port of call to design us our buildings. And for most architects, their definition of happiness might be a little bit different to the one that I've kind of just described. For an architect, happiness might be the ability to orchestrate and form a really great looking building, one that's idealistic, aspirational, creative, personal. And my favorite architect is the great Frank Gehry, an American architect, who you'll kind of recognize from the Guggenheim and his masterpieces. And he's kind of says that architecture has always been a very idealistic profession. It's about making the world a better place. Perhaps it's creating buildings that are iconic, that people will actually want to go and visit, not just this year or next year, but 50 years in the future. So architects are, their kind of feeling is they want to make not just the people who use the building better, they probably want to make the whole city vibe, the place making feel that much better as well. So they're doing a they're wearing a hat that's probably a little bit different to maybe what the users would like to see. And then if you move on to the engineers are the guys and girls who need to make these buildings stand up so that they don't fall down. People like me as well who make them comfortable. And so for us, we're kind of interested in making sure that there's a good technical solution behind that fabric and form that the architect has created. And I said I worked for OLLIO, and he's quoted as saying, the art of a good building is to arrive at a good solution. And that is one that's creative, involving imagination, intuition, and deliberate choice. So an architect or an engineer who's kind of starting to see, well, okay, we might need to design good technical solutions, but they do need to be part of and embrace the good architecture as well. So he's kind of starting to think about fusing one discipline into another. And then if we kind of think, well, okay, buildings have got to be used by those people who we hand them over to once we're finished designing and building them. The people who are FM operators and maybe even the business owners, they want a happy building that supports their occupiers' different aims and needs. They want a building that's easy to operate, able to withstand everyday use and abuse that they get. Maybe one that's iconic for staff and visitors so they can show off to their clients. Certainly one that meets sustainability objectives, and also one that meets the needs of their users. And this kind of quotation at the end here, meeting the needs of users, resulting in an efficient and effective workspace, comes from this particular document, which was produced by a set of clients, the British Council for Officers. And within the document, they kind of show that, okay, a happy building is maybe one that's composed of different facets, and happiness is found somewhere in the middle. So you've got the owner's view, you've got the occupier's view, the property manager's view, and then we could add the architect and the engineer and the user's views to give us probably an even smaller happy space, in the middle of all of that. So the happy space is that point at which the interests of everybody comes together and is aligned, and where the BCO say potential for greater value can be released. Back to over, any of you who are architects or engineers, I would invite you to take out Orchestrate's key speech. It's a speech that he wrote when he was coming to the end of his time at Orchestrate. He was just about to retire, and he kind of wrote this letter that actually gave an understanding of how he thought design should be done, and how design should actually be something that actually helps mankind. But he certainly felt that design of a happy place is not so much the work of one person, but actually it's a collective endeavor of many, many people coming together to produce something that's of value. So I've kind of always had this penchant for exploring how design gets done. And there's a fantastic book by Victor Papaniak, who was a professor at the University of Kansas in the United States. And he wrote a book back in 1970 that's been republished several times. It's still available today, called Design for the Real World. And in his studies of designers and what designers do, he kind of felt that designers really just normally they would focus their attention on the things that they know about most. And so the product of their design was something that was actually came from the expertise and the experience that they shared. But there was a whole realm of other pertinent aspects that never really ever got addressed. And so he kind of divided the design problem into two parts: the bit that the designers know about, and what he called the real problems, as if to say designers don't really know about everything that they're designing about. And that's absolutely true. I mean, any building that's being designed, actually the people who use it on a day-to-day basis will know much more about how the building should be designed than almost the architect would know about how the building should be designed. And the same is true, Papiniak said the same is true for whether it's a building, whether it's a country. And I understand that Turkey's having some issues today with currency fluctuations. And how do you solve a problem like that? You can take that problem to the world, and even to the massive problem that we're all sharing at the moment, the one of climate change. So we kind of get ourselves into design can really be split into two parts. So you kind of if you want to design a bicycle, designing a bicycle is what we call a complicated thing. So you really need to think about it and understand what goes where. And the bicycle you're seeing there is the evolution of the history of bicycles that maybe goes back, to the middle of the 18th century or the 19th century. So, but then that's completely different to the idea that you might need to learn to ride a bicycle. So the process of learning to ride a bicycle and to design a bicycle that can be ridden is a complex. So you go from design of a thing is complicated, but once the thing actually starts to collide with users, then the whole situation becomes complex. And so as designers, we really do need to understand that when we're designing a thing, it's a completely different and much more complicated problem or complex problem is to actually design something for users. And not only that, but design happens it doesn't actually happen in a vacuum. It happens inside constructs, and whether it's the construct of a committee and trying to get agreement on what the solution is, or even designing it within a culture. And so here you see the various cultures of different well-known organizations. As I sort of found this on the internet by this chap, Manu Cornet. And you can kind of see there that, well, I'm not sure I'd like to work for Microsoft in this particular, if what Manu says is correct about, their particular organization. But you can see here just how difficult it is for this whole process of thinking to have any kind of meaning or direction or rigor in it when you have all of these competing forces that effectively line to disrupt it. So moving on to how we kind of design, we kind of, I suppose design is that process, and humans are probably one of the few, not the only species who design. When it's kind of been looked at by analysts, that they've kind of looked at it and they kind of thought, well, design actually there are 4 types of design. The first 3 here are analytical thinking, and that's kind of how long will it take to bake a cake. So you're kind of trying to sort out, the relationship between in time as to how long something takes. Judgmental thinking is trying to compare and contrast. So if you had 2 cakes and you want to decide which one's the biggest, then you'd be kind of looking at both, and that process is trying to form a judgment as to which one is the best or which one is the biggest. And then you've kind of got these kind of what we call day-to-day routine thinking. So that's kind of trying to work out a little bit more complex problem of, well, okay, how much ingredients should I put in if I want to bake a cake that serves 12 people? So you can kind of see that all of these kind of things are kind of, they kind of take a little bit of brain power. But then we have this fourth kind of thinking, which is creative thinking. And creative thinking happens in a completely different way to the other three. Creative thinking is more intuitive, and it kind of almost probably happens in quiet spells when maybe even lying awake in bed at night time, marshalling different experiences and data. And it's thinking that's thought to happen in this subconscious or pre-conscious level, so that sometimes you're not even necessarily focusing on what it is that this particular problem is, but then all of a sudden it'll just come out of nowhere. So as a creative thought about how you could solve a particular problem. So it is, in that sense, it's solitary, iterative. So sometimes there's trial and error, that goes on a bit. It's uncontrolled, and actually in most cases, in our work life, and certainly, in our sort of school life, it's probably been something that's been to most parts suppressed. So usually this kind of creative thinking, it needs other people to agree with you that it's a good idea before it actually gains traction and depth. So the analytical, judgmental, and routine thinking, they're good for complicated problem solving. Whereas the creative thinking, that's good for complex problem solving. So you can kind of see that there's almost a divergence between the two different types of thinking. So you can have thinking that's good for complicated problems, and you need different thinking for complex problems, creative thinking for complex problems. So then there's the whole other genre of, okay, thinking takes time, and time is money. And Buckminster Fuller, who was probably one of the greatest architectural sort of thinkers from the United States, he said, you have to make up your mind to make sense or to make money if you want to be a designer. So in other words, you can't actually solve the entirety of a problem unless you have the time and the money to actually do that. Well, I'm kind of hoping that we can do both. I think most people want us to be able to do both, to actually make sense and to make money. So that kind of leads us to how organizations orchestrate the whole process of thinking. So when we go to work for an institution or an organization, they kind of don't really want us to just, be thinking randomly. They kind of want to organize this thinking process and get the collective ideas of everybody orchestrated into a process. And usually this is linear, because linear thinking, and I would say complicated thinking, if you like, is what we're all used to. And it's probably how the whole of society is organized. We start school in kindergarten, and parents will actually move house, certainly here in the UK, to get to the catchment zone for the right kindergarten, because they know that if they go to the right kindergarten, it will mean they will get into the right school, the right junior school, and that in turn will lead to the right high school, and then that will in turn lead to the right university. So there's a processional linearity about doing things that actually, at the beginning, that means that you will aim to get to the right place, at the end. And all of our education is the same way. We kind of do kindergarten, and we do reception, then we do year 1, then year 2, then year 3. And before we know it, we've done 13, 14 years, all sequentially. and we're all sitting in rows of desks and, all of that kind of thing. And Sir Ken Robinson, who's a great educational thinker, he kind of postulated, well, he kind of thought that because of the way our education is organized and we're structured into these linear processes, that by the time we're 6 years of age, 60% of our creative instincts have been suppressed or obliterated. So we're almost predisposed to think in sort of complicated rather than complex ways. So, and it's no surprise then that when it comes to designing a building, and here I've got the Royal Institute of British Architects linear process for how we should design a building. And what I have kind of here is a little color code underneath. The orange or the yellow is the happy thinking of the client when they first start talking to the architect about what it is they want from their building. And you can see that it goes on in stages. And in stage one, we get the property agent comes on board, and he or she has their thinking, which goes together with the client's original thinking. And little by little, all of these parties join the process so that the poor client's thoughts about what they wanted for their building has been squeezed out over time. So they end up moving into a building that's got parts of what they wanted, but not everything from what they wanted. And so there is disappointment, in some senses or another. And so this linear process, we think it gives us some certainty and some control. But actually, if you think about it, we actually start off the process with a lot of design uncertainty and not much by way of cost certainty. And there can't be many professions where we ask a client to sign on the bottom line for sometimes several hundreds of millions of pounds or dollars, with the idea that, don't worry, just have faith in us, we'll give you exactly what you want, but really not knowing what it is we're going to give them, or even how much it's going to cost until we get to the very last day of the project. This is the construction industry as we find it, and this is what the linear process gives to us. So Eric Ries talked about what he called the illusion of certainty in this linear processes, where we have scope bloat, where we cram in as much as the budget can afford, blind investment where the customer is still unsure about what he's buying until the end. These architectural risks that I've just talked about, design risks, normally come to the surface too late. Functional risk, not knowing if it's going to work until the end. Change risk, not knowing if we're going to need to change it somewhere in the middle. Resource and leveling ability, so actually not knowing whether or not we've actually got the labor and the resources to do what we need to do. And we know we're having those sorts of massive problems around the world now. And then there's the team motivation risks, that if this project does go wrong, then interest in the project. So if it runs out of money and it runs out of the right people, interest in the project then begins to wane. So the project is doomed to failure once failure starts to set in. So all of that is the illusion of happiness. And so I kind of thought, well, okay, I've had some experiences myself from going back to buildings. And this is a photograph of an office for a client at a HQ building. And the architect had the great idea, what seemed like a great idea at the time, that we wanted to have no columns, no structural columns anywhere in the office. And you can see it was achieved. The idea being that there would be uninterrupted views across the city from any desk. Well, okay, that looks great. The columns are not there, but there seems to be a lot of blinds that are closed. So there's no view anyway. But then also, users hated this building because columns actually define area. And they actually thought that this was too big an area that looked like a factory assembly line. So they were just wheels in a cog. And so there was no humanity, there was no community. It was just one big, vast production space. So they had a completely different view to what the architect thought was a great idea at the time. And I worked on the project, and I thought the architect's idea was a good idea at that time as well. But nobody spoke to the users about what they thought would be good or bad. This is a hotel, I suppose, common space. It's the hotel call it the dining room. And it's a hotel who had the great idea that they wouldn't have their staff work behind closed doors. So there were no staff areas. So staff are always available to customers at all times. But the staff hates this because they need time to actually have private conversations, and there aren't any places where they can have it. So whilst this idea is a great idea from the client's perspective of what he wants to deliver to the customer, it's not great for his staff who really do want to have those private conversations when they've just been torn strips off by a member of the public or had a bad experience with something or other, and just want somewhere to even go and have a weep, sometimes. So this project, this is a school that I kind of went back to for special educational needs children. So these are children who have difficulty in regulating their mood, and just for no reason other than that's just how they are made. That's how they think and work. But you'll see here there's hardening put onto what is a brand new wall, and that is because within a few days this dysregulated pupils started kicking the walls and making holes in them. So there was no conversation between the teachers who teach dysregulated children and the architect about this as a potential problem. And the head teacher, who was part of the design conversation, it never occurred to him to mention that this could be a problem, because he's not actually part of the everyday kids who are, kicking walls in classrooms. So it never occurred to him to actually mention this as part of the design process. We've got another example here from a school where the architect thought these are long corridors, and it would be really great to have some relief on the wall. So rather than having a plain plaster, to leave these sheer walls uncovered, so that there was a different patination, and that architecturally that would be a good idea. Well, teachers can't get pupils to walk past. These pupils go into dysregulation when they see something change on the structure of the wall like that. It's not something that they can help, but it just happens. So again, this is where the building has, people using the building sometimes know more about what should be designed. So you can kind of see there that Papaniek was right. Design happens inside the sphere of what designers know about, but there's a bigger problem that sometimes they don't know about. So in all of that, buildings are, building buildings, and this process of designing buildings is not a linear process. It is actually, and needs to be, an organic process. So it's a product of multiple decisions made by multiple of individuals, with multiple agendas and experiences. And you can try to build two buildings to be identical, and they may be, but the way they come to be will always be different. and the way they will be experienced by the people who use them will be different as well. So we do need to design in a new way. We need to be able to define the outcome that we want to achieve. And we need to understand for the user, what does good look like? And that will help us then to produce a higher quality product that will be in the hands of those who understand it and know how to use it. And so high quality means paying respect and having responsibility for those users. Because otherwise, what's the point? Is a building just to become an asset to be traded on the stock exchange, or is it to have a deeper and more fulfilling meaning? So all of this panders to performance, and we're all aware of the great Steve Jobs, love him or hate him, and what he stands for. But he was sort of great visionary in thinking, and I think everybody will agree, completely transformed, the mobile phone and technology market. But he didn't set out by thinking we should all have a screen that we can use our fingers to scroll things on. Those ideas started with the customer. So his idea was, don't start with a product and try and find customers. Start with customers and design a product that will fit what they want. And we have to start thinking about buildings in the same way. So it's not about delivering buildings and then hoping that users will like them. We have to actually start with users and design buildings back to how the building needs to be designed. So Steve Jobs wasn't the first one to think about this. A chap called Winston Royston, an electrical engineer with IBM, he realized that IBM were having lots of problems with designing products that nobody wanted. Somebody would have a great idea about what to design, and they would design it and put it to market, but then it wouldn't sell. And a lot of that was because sometimes when you design a product and just before it goes to market, you test it, you find that there are issues with it. And if there are issues that you can't fix that program design, then you may have to scrap the whole thing, go right back to the whole software requirement. And going back is expensive and highly wasteful. So not to mention demoralizing for everybody who's involved with the project. So he kind of thought, well, we need to do things in a slightly different way. We need to find out who the user is, build what's called a minimum viable product, a prototype, test that prototype with the customer, make sure that it's something that will sell. And then if it does, then we can use a linear process to design the rest of it, knowing that we have something and we can put the resources into designing something that's not going to go to waste. And so that whole idea within the tech industry, the software development industry, grew a lot of traction. So much so there have been various different versions of this, from dynamic systems development method, DSDM, to Agile, Scrum, to Crystal Clear, to extreme programming. And so I suppose the one of those four that I've kind of picked up on is the one that was developed by Ken Schwaber. Jeff, I can't remember Jeff's name, but I do apologize. It'll come to me in a sec. So that Agile Scrum is the one that we've kind of developed on, and these guys sort of met in the 1990s to try and, I suppose, push Agile methods to a much greater audience. And so they came up with what was called then the Agile Manifesto. And the Agile Manifesto had got effectively 4 statutes to it. And that was that we would place individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So get rid of all the idea that we need project management and linear processes. Let's just think about prioritizing quality of people and face-to-face collaboration above using these prescribed project management tools. Then having the working products over comprehensive documentation. So instead of producing lots and lots of paperwork to define what it is we want to build, let's just build a prototype and test it as quickly as we possibly can and find out whether or not we've got something that is going to be of use ultimately at the end of the day. And then there's kind of customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So instead of having reams and reams of lawyers poring over contracts, let's just put all that to one side for a bit and decide that we're going to work really closely with this client and really find out what's in that bit that we call the design problem. And then lastly, responding to change over following a plan. Now, we know that change in most cases is the enemy for what we would normally do in designing buildings. But what the manifesto says, well, hang on a minute, why should we leave potential change to fester in the future? Why don't we do what we can to bring whatever that change is going to be as further forward to the front of the project so that we can do something about it before it starts costing us money? So in that sense, we invite change, we want to understand it, and we want to deal with it, and we want to know about it as early as we possibly can. So, so this was kind of a completely different way of thinking about things. And whilst they did kind of say, well, okay, that's not to say that we don't need processes and tools. That's not to say that we don't need comprehensive documentation, or we don't need a contract, or we don't need a plan. We do need all of those, but we shouldn't make those the priority. We should make individuals, work in product, customer collaboration, and responding to change. They're the things that really do need to become the priority. Jeff Sutherland, the great Jeff Sutherland. What these guys were saying was that there's a version of old happy, or old project management, which relied on drawing, specs, instructions, programs, a technical based understanding of what the final product was going to look like. And this would actually, all of this put together, if you think about it, all of this says what will happen if things go wrong. What Jeff and Ken wanted to do was to bring forward a new version of happy, which would be based on open discussion and collaboration with users, say what would happen if everything went right for customers, a collaborative understanding of what the end result would behave like, and then you backcast that to get what the customer's understanding of how the product would be used will be. And customers understand the things on the right, but they don't understand the things on the left. And so the methodology that's been deployed to actually try to bring all of this together to get complex thinking as well as complicated thinking in the same room at the same time. So introducing innovation and creativity in the room at the same time. And that is to start with step one, which they called user stories. And we're fitting all of this into that linear process of Reba Stage 0 and 1. Product design, which is when you get everybody's ideas, you literally sieve them, examine them, find out which ones are the big ticket items. And then once you've got the big ticket items, we go into this prototype building, so the Scrum. And the Scrum is taken from rugby parlance, gone back to to Twickenham. So users and designers work together to solve the big ticket problems. And in this particular case, we're taking architects and users, we're putting them in the same room at the same time to solve users' backlog problems. And then we build a prototype, and within the construction industry, we think, well, we can't build the physicality of a whole building, but what we can do is we can actually build a virtual reality version of that building. So we can deeply immerse our users and architects inside this virtual reality world that is the building that we're thinking that they want to solve their problems. And so to build that, to give them that happy building, and to make sure that it's a happy building for the users. And then once we've done all of that, then we can continue on the linear process if that's what we want to do. And that linear process could also become an agile process. And there are ways in which we can actually make the construction process that much better. And there are guys on the west coast of America, Felipe, engineer, being one of them, who's probably listening in here, who are doing fantastic work in helping contractors to understand how they can construct in an agile way. So we thought this was a great idea, and we wanted to test it. We wanted to see if we could actually do agile in buildings in a live setting, using real clients with a real building requirement, and see whether we could do it. Now, we couldn't get a client to pay a fee to do it. So what we did was we went to the UK government. We entered a competition, which is the Audience of the Future competition, and we managed to get £60,000, and that allowed us to do, effectively allowed us to do 2 projects. But in the end, one of our partners, Hippo Digital, who were one of our team, they were so impressed with what they were doing with us on other projects, on these other 2 projects, they wanted to have it done on their office as well. Which in the event, because it was an office project, and the other 2 projects were different types of building, and we thought it'd be nice to have an office project. So we said, yeah, okay, we'll sort of make the funding stretch to fit the Hippo Digital scenario as well. So we wanted to find out, would users embrace the methodology? Could we develop prototypes quickly enough? Would users be comfortable in the VR setting? So, there's kind of some potential health issues there. And were there any hardware issues that would need to be resolved, insofar as, what types of PCs and machines and all of that kind of thing would we use? So the building, this is the building. It's quite a small building, really, which suited us, and we weren't always. The projects that we could use on this research were projects that we literally had to have on the boards, clients who we already had in our domain and were willing to do this. And the process of getting the funding is quite a short period of time. It was about 6 weeks. So we had to get these guys signed up within a 6-week period as well. So we weren't always, able to choose maybe the projects that we would have wanted to have had, but nevertheless, this was what we felt was a pretty good one. So the building itself is near to Leeds Station. It's also near to Hippo Digital's biggest client, which is the National Health Service here in the UK. One of the things that they wanted in their brief was that they wanted lots of wall space, because they have workshops with their clients and they need to be able to write on the walls, and they do invite their clients in. And one of the things they kind of thought was, we'd actually like to have a building that's between the train station and our major client, so that they walk through and they could drop into us, and they can literally, if they feel like they don't want to work in their own office, or they want some quiet and come and work in our drop-in space, they could do that. So that was they were hoping that they would get some synergy with their clients, because they were big clients, and they would know, they would sort of think, yeah, okay, I will go and work in Hippo Digital for a little while. In order to understand Hippo Digital, we kind of broke them down. First off, we kind of had a stage 0, which kind of not part of the strictly part of the agile process, just to see who we kind of got. And most organizations break down to minders, people who look after the business, grinders, people who do the work, and finders, people who find the work for the grinders to do and the minders to look after. And you can kind of see from this, very easily. And Hippo Digital kind of said to us, this is a fantastic diagram for echoing back just how your business works, which was not something that they kind of, was immediately apparent, even though it was one of their own guys working with us who came up with this as a concept in the first instance. But there were other things that we were kind of interested in as well, that they had dogs in the office and, things like that. So in the user stories, we, which was the first stage of Agile, we give them a card after some exercises, and we say, okay, when you need to complete as many of these cards as you possibly can, and thinking of the types of people who are from that zero, the typologies of people in step 0. Tell us what you want to do, why you want to do it, and how give the problem some context. So when they kind of did this, they kind of filled in literally about 200 cards. And we started to sift them, and we started to be able to get, these are sort of typical. So as a researcher, I would like to find a desk and set up quickly when they come into the office, so as to not lose time and start work quickly. Seems like quite a reasonable request. Another researcher, when here's, I would like to securely store my belongings, so as not to carry my work materials away from the office. So didn't want to carry the materials away, wanted to be able to store things. So you can kind of see that there's a kind of, there are themes that actually start, regular themes that can cover quite a number of different cards as they were produced. We have one, so, better information technology. So overall, I don't know if we can get rid of, we can get a little bit. There were, I suppose, 6 themes that sort of came through, covering space and spaces, desks and furniture, first impression to other clients coming in, good technology, health and well-being, and ease of access. So all of those are what we call the product backlog. And so these are little specification snippets. So all of that becomes a happy brief, if you like, for all of the things that the users want in this new building. So we kind of give that to hand that into the next stage, which is the Scrum stage. Sorry about this. So we've kind of got the requirements there. This is our architect, and these are our users sitting around him. There's another architect over here, and there's some of my team that are here, and we're kind of there together trying to solve these problems. And this was kind of the first step, which is kind of just sketching. And we kind of thought, wouldn't it be great if there was, the administration team were kind of thinking they'd like to be furthest away from the door, so that people, when they came into the office, didn't wander into their space, because there was some issues of privacy. But there would need to be a touchdown space, so people coming in from the office could get straight into a touchdown space or go into meetings. And then back here we have what they call the heart of the office. So this is the social space, the kitchen, touchdown kind of space. And then back here is a place where they can actually have their NHS and other client workshops. So they don't need to actually come into this part of the building. They can kind of go straight in and have it. So that looked on paper like it would be a good idea, and all of the users felt that would be a good idea as well. They also had views to the river from the admin spaces. So the people who were there all the time got, the best of the amenity, if you like, of the building outside. And then that was quickly translated, literally within the period of a week. We got from a 2D sketch up to a 3D sense of what the building looked like. And so you can see here, this is the entrance. This is the place where people would be meted and greeted. They could be directed into the kitchen space to have a coffee if that's what they wanted to do, or otherwise they would be directed down to their meeting space or across to the other side to the workshop, depending on where they went. And the admin people at the back here, they were, their security was preserved. They could work quietly there. They weren't getting, bothered too much by guest traffic that was coming in and going out. And there's also a segregation here between guest flow and staff flow. So admin staff could use the staff flow to get to the kitchen without needing to interact too much with guest traffic. So they thought all of this worked really well. So the confidential area was kind of here at the top, and again that could sort of work into being a sort of a meeting space for the exec team as well as a workshop that kind of doubled up as both. So all of that. So we wanted to kind of just, well, okay, that looks great on paper and in 2D, 3D, which is kind of what we'd normally be used to working in. But we wanted to see what would actually happen if we immersed the people in the space, and whether it would actually give us any feedback, and to pick out those kind of things that I showed you early on when we went back to buildings to find that there were problems. So we wanted to get those problems out. So this is one of the team leaders, and it's quite noisy in the background. So there is some text that you can kind of read, but I'll just let it play and see what she says. So she's in VR. You're probably not hearing her actually, because I didn't actually click to get the voiceover. But you can see there, she's saying that.
Does it look a bit different than when it was on the screen?
It doesn't look different.
So it doesn't look different, but it gives her the scale of the desks in the room, and she thinks that's really useful. You can see there, in the corner is what she's actually seeing, the area of the building she's actually in. So she thinks it's pretty good. But then we take her into the middle space, and she's liking the way it's laid out.
And there's so many different kind of zones.
The different zones that are in there. But it's when we take her to the next part of the building, which is that kitchen area.
I suppose lunch. Having that
she mentions where they sit for lunch.
So do you think you've got enough space for actually just...
So you can see there it's a breakfast bar, but she actually would prefer a table.
Yeah.
Do you know if there's 4 or 5 or 6 of us?
Yeah. Just having a place to meet and just over lunch. And
we often lunch together.
Yeah.
So you can sit on here, but it's obviously not the most social show.
Yeah.
And that's been quite important.
I can understand that.
Yeah. So you don't have a table at the moment.
So you can see there that that's something that we could have put the breakfast bar in.
I always think that one of the most important things is a kitchen table, because that's where everybody, when you're eating and talking and chatting, that's when you're most relaxed and sharing more information, I guess, that kind of environment.
So we could have put the breakfast bar in, but it would have been wrong for them. They wanted that community of a table to actually sit around. So I'll just start with that. This chap is a younger chap, obviously used to gaming, and has absolutely no difficulty in literally zooming right the way around the building and telling, whoops, excuse me, this is all in a bit pear-shaped. Here we go. You'll see how good he is at using the technology to literally zoom around the building. What he's seeing is in this screen here. And so they're getting a completely immersive experience. So it's as if they're actually standing in the building itself and looking at it. And we have had, well, we've on one of the other projects, we had one of the directors spend 40 minutes with a headset, literally going over every single aspect of how the building was arranged, how we could substitute different spaces for different areas, where storage would be, all these kind of things. So they're getting a much deeper and more meaningful appreciation. This next guy, I kind of put this next guy in because of the COVID kind of situation. We did this before COVID happened, obviously. But you'll kind of see, he kind of says, so you need to buy one for your house so you can work from home and think you are in the office. So which is entirely possible that we could actually end up frequenting spaces virtually. So, and there are indeed applications now that will allow up to 25 people inside the same virtual space. And so you can imagine that you could design a space, get 25 people in there, literally have them working in there, for a period of time, trying out their space in virtual reality, and then coming back with feedback to tell us how it should be built in reality. That's kind of, the future is there to be grasped. Move that down. So we're coming to the end. So you can kind of see that through this whole process of agile methods, agile thinking, prototyping, we're fusing together complex thinking with complicated thinking. We're actually designing not just the bit that's in the realms of the architect or the engineer, but we're designing out the whole of the problem. And so there's a certain validation of the design in real time. We're adding only what's necessary and no more than that. Users and designers they still work within, a linear set of rules, if you like, in some senses, but we're retaining that creativity. The end result is a digital brief. So effectively, you've got a model there that can just be developed that actually captures value as well. And so there's less temptation to want to change it or rethink it because all the thinking's already been done. It's a brief that's shareable and testable. Matter of fact, at the end of this, if you've all got your phones ready with QR readers, I'm going to let you have a look at some QR codes where you can actually stand in the same space here in Hippo Digital and have a look around on your phone. So it's immediately shareable. And so I feel that the happy customer is locked in. Complicated, complex designing, creative. Constructors know what to build and just get on with it. So it's completely de-risked. And then the option to continue with Scrum into the construction phase, as I mentioned earlier, is retained. So, well, that's kind of where it's at, for now. And if you do have a phone nearby and you want to do that, then have a look around those. I'm sure that you can kind of stop this later anyway, and you stop the video and have a look at it, and so you give it a chance. So I'm going to stop sharing there and come back.
Thank you, Eddie. It was a great presentation. And when we called the name of the events Happy Construction, we thought about our unhappiness. We were focused on unhappiness, actually. We didn't think about the definition of happiness. And you made that for us. It was great. I think I will write a blog summarizing your descriptions and put them down on blog post. They were great, actually. By the way, Simon, welcome. I have seen you It's great to see you after 5 years. Sorry, he was the first guy I met Agile practices 5 years ago. We will talk you later, but I want to welcome you first.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Well, that's a coincidence, because the architect who was involved with this project, who I showed you there, is a chap called John Orrell, spelled exactly the same way as yourself. So
Wow.
I don't know if there's any relationship there.
Okay. I want to ask, we haven't received any questions on chatboard yet, but if you have any, you can write on chatboard, and I'm also checking the YouTube channel. We have some visitors there also. About the, you have VR systems, and you are watching the, you are feeling the interior design, but as well as I see, the electromechanical works are the main issue when we are working in offices or we are working inside, and the sun shades, the sun rays are critical when we are working inside. Did you have the chance to invite the experiences of electromechanical engineers in the first stage, or people? How did you help the users to feel the ambience, to feel the electromechanical, the lighting, the ventilating? Did they feel anything about those? What will they be like when they occupied the building?
Well, obviously, it's, you know, from the point of view of helping people to feel what the comfort is like. That's probably something that we, you know, in terms of temperature, you know, and air quality and you know, freshness of the air. Those are kind of things that I suppose it's difficult to replicate, but it's entirely possible to replicate daylight. And you know, I mean, there are kind of things that we talk about in, you know, when we're kind of designing what we call biophilia. So trying to integrate, get the outside and the inside to actually feel that there's a connection between the outside and inside. So designing so that you can kind of see shadows running across the floor, or see patinations happening, you know, because of, you know, louvers, or, you know, or markings on windows, you know, those kind of things. So it's entirely possible to design the daylighting ambience and to make that feel real, and the software actually does do that. We kind of didn't do that in the although we could have. We didn't do that as part of this particular project, really. I guess because we were more interested in the kind of interface of the technology, and making sure that the technology and the process actually worked. But had we had longer time with them, then I do think we could have given them, you know, a little bit more idea of how, you know, the spaces would change from winter to summer to, you know, evening to night, different types of lightings for how we would light the office, you know, at nighttime. All of those, you know, it's entirely possible to replicate all of that with reasonable accuracy, you know, through the normal process of a project, really, not even without having to have it as necessarily an agile process. But I guess where agile comes in is actually really just, I suppose our purpose for it was to integrate users into this design process. So, and they, in fairness, they are more interested in the functional aspects about how the things work in practice, and you'll see from those, you know, going back to some of those buildings, it does tend to be things about spaces and surfaces and functionality and space and, as furniture, those kind of things are the things that that help them to do what they do, in a better way. But it is, certainly it's now. I mean, some of it, so from the point of view of what would it feel like, and we do model what air patterns and what thermal responses are, and you can kind of see that in imagery, and we can actually produce that kind of stuff. But actually, that stops short of being able to feel what the comfort will feel like or what the air will feel like. So you would probably need to build a test rig or something like that to actually do something like that. But so that bit's not really possible. I think that would be stretching the agile capability a little bit more than perhaps and I don't really think it needs to. I mean, there's also a thing. I know I'm rattling on a little bit, but there is also a thing we have in buildings which we call forgiveness factor. And you can actually have buildings that are uncomfortable, but people will forgive them if they love them and for other reasons. They love them because of the way it helps them to work, or they love them because of the view, or they love them because it's close to nature. So people do fall in love with buildings, and if they do fall in love with a building, then sometimes they will forgive it being uncomfortable for periods of time as well.
Maybe take some precautions after occupation, maybe.
Yeah.
Actually, we are combating with architectural ego and user needs here. Because architecting that some architects say that I am the hand of God. Some architects feel that. So I will design the way you will live. So we must sharp. They are so sharp. So we must cut their sharpness to some way. So it's great to get user stories and to experience, to take the experience. It's great, really.
Well, that's an interesting point that you raised there, Demet, about how architects feel when they're actually going through the process. But John Orwell, he kind of felt that designing in an agile environment was really liberating, because he felt that he could literally come up with the really silliest of ideas, things that there are ideas that he felt that if he was designing in normally, he didn't want to look a fool in front of, the project manager and the client. But when he had users in the room with him, and he could come up with a silly idea, and they would tell him straight away whether they thought it was silly or whether it was great. And if they thought it was great, he would just run with it. And one of our other projects, he had the grand idea of putting a glass walkway down the side of the church, which seemed completely potty, absolutely potty, but they loved it, So, and actually, when we kind of looked at it, it actually solved every single one of their tick box problems. They wanted a space that they could actually enter from the back of the building or the front of the building. The glass box did that. They wanted a space that was secure, that you could meet and greet in. So if you went to the back of the building, there was no place, or the front of the building, there was no place for that because it was a church. So this gave them that. So it gave them security. And then it gave them legibility. So there's a place that you could actually see the outside of the church and where you needed to go from within it. So it ticked loads and loads of different boxes. And they actually thought it was inspired, and they went with it. But ordinarily, he thought, there's no way they're going to go for this, but I'm just going to say it anyway. So he came out with a really great idea, and it got traction. And the agile process was what actually gave it the traction. So John really enjoyed the process and a massive advocate for what we're doing.
Okay. Any questions or any addings? Okay, you can go now.
Actually, I would like to thank to Edwards he really make the presentation so wonderful that we can understand the silos inside of our brains, because the definition of happiness is different for architecture, engineer, and the user. At the end, we are always thinking in our silos, and we never think the users actually when we make the design. But when we make our designs in a happy way, as Edward tell, and if we can combine everyone together in one room and discuss, and the end product will be, as Edward said, also forgiveness factor, lots of forgiveness factors at the end. And I want to just thank to Edward for the wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Tolga. I mean, when I talk about happiness, I think everybody who was involved in these projects really enjoyed the projects. You know, we loved what we were doing, and I think the users loved being part of what we were doing as well. And I go back to the church, and churches these days are, the users are usually, you know, elderly people, and there were quite a few elderly people. And we were showing one of the ladies who had the headset on, and suddenly there were tears streaming down her face. And we were kind of saying, well, it's making you emotional. She says, yes, because I know I'm not going to live to see this. So she got all of us. So it was, you know, from that point of view, the whole process was just, you know, it was humanizing. It brought out the human in all of us. And so we weren't just designers. We were doing something that we felt was going to really make a difference. And that's ultimately, as designers, what we want to be doing, is making a difference.
We are designing for human beings.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Then I'm closing the session if there's no other questions. It was really a great presentation, and you integrated the happiness in all the way. That's what we are looking for in our life. It was great, really. So in that way, it was so great. Great anyway. Okay, I want to say goodbye, and I want to make you aware that Simon will be our next guest, aren't you, Simon? I hope, hopefully. Where are you, Simon? Hopefully, Simon will be our next guest in December. The third. I think we are okay in that. Or will we talk later? Okay.
Go for it, Simon.
We hope to see Simon for the next event. Anyway, see you, and don't forget to follow us, our Agile Construction, on social media in Instagram and LinkedIn. We will inform you about our events and our other posts, and you can also join us to create our community and make the construction industry happier in all ways. Okay, thank you for everyone. See you. Bye.
Yeah.
Have a nice evening. Thank you for the
Thank you,
presentation.
Thank you.